Allow me to introduce myself. I am Julia Carrington. I have reached the age of 47, joined in matrimony, without children, an art teacher by day, a master of feigned contentment by night. In a serene cul-de-sac nestled in Ohio, the streets are adorned with uniform hedges, mirroring the even more uniform unions that flourish within this enclave. My husband, Greg, is employed in the field of logistics. That's his interpretation of it. It signifies his perpetual absence. Chicago on Monday, Denver by Thursday. At times, the echo of his footsteps slips from my memory. What is the truth? Silence has become a familiar companion to me. In the tender embrace of early spring, they took up residence next door. As I tended to the rose bush, my attention was drawn to a U-Haul van maneuvering into the driveway of the vacant house next door. Initially, it barely registered with me. Individuals drift in and out of this neighborhood as effortlessly as the changing seasons. As I stood tall, brushing the dirt from my gloves, my gaze fell upon him. A solitary figure, a man. In the midst of the 30s, approaching the latter part of the decade. Slender and elongated. Not conventionally handsome in the way of movie stars, yet there was a subtlety in his movements, as if he were a relic from a bygone era. He bore a box marked Emma's Books in striking bold black ink. Then I beheld her, a petite girl, perhaps 6 years of age, with hair reminiscent of damp sand and eyes that suggested she had already unraveled the mysteries of the world. In due course, I discovered that her name was Emma, and his name was Adam. He offered a courteous nod as our eyes met, the sort of acknowledgement exchanged between strangers who instinctively know their paths will cross again. I returned the nod. I believed that would mark the conclusion of the matter. It was not. In the days that followed, I observed their gradual acclimatization through the narrow gaps of my blinds. Not with intention. Simply, casually mentioned. The dawn ritual of coffee. The sun dips low, casting a warm glow as the dishes await their turn in the soapy embrace of the afternoon. Wine at dusk. Perpetually the same window, perpetually the same direction. His movements held a captivating quality, efficient, gentle and devoid of haste. He never raised his voice at the child. Trash was never left outside. He would often fill the evenings with jazz on his porch, the melodies gentle enough for me to feign disinterest, yet resonant enough to linger in the air of my backyard. I was unaware of the extent to which I had devoted my life to observing others as they navigated their own journeys. One night that week, Greg reached out to me. He mentioned that his stay in Dallas would extend beyond what he initially anticipated. I informed him that it was acceptable. He refrained from inquiring about my recent activities. I kept to myself the fact that I had been tending to the same plants, merely to be in the open air when Adam strolled by. I repeatedly reassured myself that it was merely a matter of curiosity. A friendly curiosity. That is all there is to say. Yet, there was something in the way Adam gazed beyond me, as if I were a mere shadow, a specter in his world, that ignited a deep yearning within me to be acknowledged. And that marked the inception of all that I had never envisioned. The initial occasion I rapped on his door, it was cloaked in the pretense of neighborly goodwill. That's what I reassured myself at least. I had engaged in the art of baking, a straightforward recipe, cinnamon apple bread, reminiscent of the times when Greg would come home for dinner. It was never part of my intentions. The ingredients lay in wait, simply present. The stillness enveloped the surroundings. And a voice within urged me, deliver it to him. It rested in my palms, warm and sweet, akin to a whispered secret. I lingered until the sun had descended just low enough to appear nonchalant, late enough that no curious eyes would be watching from behind their curtains, yet early enough to avoid raising any suspicions. At least that was my wish. I traversed the 10 paces from my front door to his, my heart echoing more prominently than the sound of my footsteps. As he swung the door open, his expression revealed a sense of astonishment. Unbothered. He seemed taken aback, as if the sound of the knock had caught him completely unprepared. It dawned on me then that he likely received few visitors. He donned a well-worn gray t-shirt paired with jeans. His hair bore a hint of moisture, as if he had just emerged from the shower. Soft classical music floated through the air behind him, mingling with the gentle scent of lavender wafting from somewhere within. The dwelling exuded a sense of warmth, yet retained an air of tranquility. It is more temperate than I had anticipated. more temperate than my own. "Hello," I remarked. I believed it was time to extend a proper welcome. "This is my creation." He cast a fleeting look at the bread before turning his gaze back to me. His expression was a mystery to me. Could it be gratitude? Sympathy? Unease? "That's very kind," he said at last, taking the loaf with care, as though it were something delicate. "I appreciate it, Julia," I remarked, my smile stretching wider than necessary. "Adjacent." He inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Adam." I was already aware of his name, yet I feigned ignorance. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Adam." We lingered there, caught in a moment that stretched beyond its rightful bounds, neither fully acquainted nor entirely apart. His daughter was absent. I would later learn that she spent every Wednesday with her grandparents. It was merely the two of us. A man I couldn't seem to look away from. He left me standing outside uninvited. That ought to have marked the conclusion. As I began to walk away, he remarked, "You didn't need to put in all that effort." I cast a glance behind me. At times, it feels refreshing to find a reason to return to the art of baking. His gaze held mine for a fleeting moment, stirring a deep ache within me. It was not as I had anticipated. Not yearning, not at this moment. Yet acknowledgement. A pain that lingers, born from a void that has stretched on for far too long. Upon re-entering, I found myself positioned behind the front door, my hand lingering on the knob. I had not laid a finger on him. He had not laid a finger on me. Yet, an unspoken connection lingered between us, one that eluded definition. For 2 days he vanished from my sight. Yet I couldn't shake the memory of his hand grazing mine as he reached for the bread, or the manner in which his eyes seemed to pierce through me, just for a fleeting moment, and then they didn't. One cannot fault a woman for her inclination to listen. It commenced with the soft resonance of piano keys wafting through the twilight, neither loud nor theatrical, but tender, as if someone were gently inviting the notes from the stillness rather than imposing them upon it. The sound drifted in from the open window of Adam's living room, the one that overlooked the slender strip of grass dividing our homes. Initially, I believed it to be a mere recording, the kind that fills the silence when the house becomes too still to endure. Yet, after several evenings, I began to discern the delicate flaws, the pauses, the hesitations. A note lingered just a moment too long, and it dawned on me, it was him. He performed as the sun dipped below the horizon, neither before nor after. Just as the sky began to dissolve into a bruised purple hue, a sense of nostalgia and unreality enveloped everything around. And so, I found myself reshaping my day to accommodate it. I would conclude dinner sooner, accelerate the process of folding laundry. I reassured myself that I was acting with efficiency. Yet, the reality was this. I yearned to be by the window as he performed. I never laid eyes on him, only the outline of his shoulders, his head gently inclined. At times, Emma would nestle on the couch behind him, engrossed in a book or drifting into slumber, oblivious to the fact that her father's melodies were unraveling another soul just 2 windows away. One evening stands out vividly in my memory. A glass of wine had just been poured for myself, the delightful variety, reserved for moments of significance. Seated at the kitchen table with the lights softened and candles flickering, I allowed the music to envelop my home, claiming it as my own, as though he were a part of my very essence. It was a composition I couldn't identify, yet it plunged directly into my heart, not quite akin to joy, unlike sorrow, resembling recollection. An old version of myself, one I hadn't realized I longed for, stirred to life once more, wide awake and present. I shut my eyes, envisioning myself positioned behind him at the piano, gently laying my hand over his as it rested on the keys. Envisioned him gazing up at me, not with surprise nor with hesitation, but as if he had been anticipating my arrival. The music came to a halt. The ensuing silence was overwhelming. It created a void so profound that it took me by surprise. It was only when a tear traced its path to the corner of my mouth that I became aware of my silent weeping. I tidied up in a flash, extinguished the flames of the candles, wiped my face as if removing traces of a hidden transgression. For it was merely a symphony, merely a neighbor. A mere sound drifted through a window, one I had no claim to hold on to. Yet, on that particular night, as I extinguished the light and positioned myself by the bedroom window, he appeared before me. Adam, positioned in his yard, gazing in the direction of my home, staying still, not waving, simply observing, and I found myself pondering. Had he been aware of my attentive presence all this time? Or perhaps, had he been performing for my sake? The storm descended as if it had been biding its time, searching for a purpose. One of those weighty pressing rains of Ohio, the sort that arrives with quaking heavens and a crackling energy in the atmosphere before the initial drop even descends. A type that resonates on a personal level. Earlier Greg had sent a text. The flight has been delayed once more. Do not stay awake for me. I chose not to respond. I found myself fixated on the message, setting the phone aside as if it were an object I dared not approach. As the clock struck 8 p.m., darkness enveloped the room, my hand poised mid-pour, a glass of red wine teetering on the brink of fullness, while my carefully curated playlist fell into an unexpected silence. The house dimmed into obscurity, and I remained motionless, the sole illumination provided by the sporadic bursts of lightning illuminating the kitchen window. I felt no fear. I had grown accustomed to solitude. Yet, in the depths of the darkness, the solitude resonated with an intensity that was almost palpable. In that moment a thought flickered to life. Candles. In the drawer near the laundry room I had a few stashed away. However, there were no matches. Greg had carried the final box to the grill and failed to replenish it. Without a moment's hesitation, I snatched a raincoat and stepped out into the tempest. Adam's porch light remained illuminated, a gentle golden radiance, likely emanating from a generator. I resolved to simply request a lighter or perhaps a candle, or even both, and then continue on my journey. A humble appeal from a neighbor. A simple task devoid of any threat. As my knuckles rapped against the wood, the door swung open with remarkable swiftness, suggesting he had been poised just behind it. "Hey," I murmured, tucking damp strands of hair behind my ear. "The power has gone out." He refrained from inquiring. He simply stepped aside and beckoned me in. I paused for a moment, just long enough to sense the weight of my decision, but then I stepped forward into the unknown. The living room exuded a cozy warmth, softly illuminated by the flickering glow of several candles. Devoid of fragrance, devoid of embellishment, merely functional, truthful. A gentle fire flickered and whispered in the hearth. On the coffee table rested 2 mugs of tea, one nearly empty, the other still full and waiting. I lingered in silence, water cascading down my form, caught in a moment of indecision about whether to break the stillness with my voice. Adam vanished for a brief moment, only to reappear with a towel in hand. "Here," he remarked. "Allow me," he gestured toward my shoulders. I allowed him to proceed. God help me, I allowed it to happen. He dabbed softly, then handed the towel to me with care. His fingers grazed against mine. Neither of us could bring ourselves to break the connection. "Thank you," I murmured softly. "Would you like to take a seat for a moment? It may not be grand, but it offers more warmth than the world beyond." I certainly did. I reassured myself that I was merely biding my time until the storm passed. We sat facing one another, the room cloaked in a gentle dimness, suffused with the warm scents of firewood and peppermint. The sole sound was the rain gently tapping against the windows, as if it too yearned to enter. He inquired about my well-being. I assured them I was fine. He refrained from pressing the matter. He mentioned that Emma was once more at her grandparents' place. I inclined my head in agreement. Our conversation was minimal, almost non-existent. Only fragments and morsels. The tempest raged, a cacophony of wind and rain that seemed to echo the turmoil within. Nature unleashed its fury, painting the sky in shades of gray and fury, as if the heavens themselves were embroiled in a fierce debate. Each gust of wind carried with it a sense of urgency, a reminder of the raw power that lies just beyond our control. A moment of shared laughter as the thunder caused the mugs to tremble. And then there was a silence that felt not at all uncomfortable, merely suspended. The atmosphere seemed to pause, as if it were suspended in a moment of anticipation. Our gazes intertwined. In the soft glow of the flickering candlelight, a familiar connection stirred between us once more. Not warmth. Not at this moment. However, consent. He gazed at me as if he were confronting a desire he was reluctant to acknowledge. And I glanced back, weary from the charade of pretending I didn't crave recognition. I find myself unable to recall the act of standing. Yet, in an instant I found myself near enough to discern the delicate stubble on his jawline. I noticed how his pupils dilated as I took a breath. I might have reached out to him. I did not. He remained still. Nor did I. Yet, in that instant we traversed an unseen boundary. And that was far more disheartening than a kiss. More perilous than an admission. For now the desire was palpable. Neither of us could deny the sensation that had washed over us. Sleep eluded me. That night. Not due to any particular event. Yet it was as if something nearly transpired. And nearly as more burdensome than guilt. As I shut my eyes, his visage lingered in the flickering glow of the flames. Neither a smile nor a frown, simply motionless. As if he were grasping tightly to a secret, unwilling to let it slip away. Perhaps I was as well. I reassured myself that it was merely the tempest outside. The elixir of the vine. The shadows. The solitude. I attempted to gather every justification I could muster, arranging them like sandbags against an impending deluge. Yet, by the break of dawn they had all succumbed. Greg's call came in just after the clock struck 7 a.m. He mentioned that his flight was rescheduled, inquired whether I required anything. I firmly expressed my refusal to him. I assured him that all was well. My voice resonated with an unsettling familiarity. So familiar, it churned my stomach. Later that day I spotted Adam in his front yard, hunched over a bag of mulch. I lingered behind the curtain, my gaze fixed on him far longer than was prudent. His shirt adhered to his back. His hands glided with a deliberate and steady grace. Then he raised his gaze. He caught sight of me. I don't imply that he observed the window shift or realized I was observing him. No. Our gazes intertwined. Not even for a moment. Yet, for an extended period. Long enough for the breath in my lungs to turn to ice. Long enough for me to lose track of my surroundings. Long enough for all that was left unsaid to surge forth between us, reminiscent of a familiar melody we both recalled by heart. It was not a smile. It was not mere flirtation. It was a gaze that conveyed, I recall. And my body, this vessel that had long been deprived of such attention, reacted instinctively, before my mind could intervene. A warm flush crept across my cheeks. In that moment I felt a rush of warmth, as if I had been transported back to my 17-year-old self. I drew the curtain with a swift motion. My heart thunders in my ears, my fingers quiver at the brink of the fabric. I carried on with my day as if nothing had transpired. Yet, with each encounter of my reflection, she appeared before me. The woman I had interred beneath a mountain of grocery lists and the veneer of polite conversations. The individual who once laughed with abandon and felt with great intensity. She was not dead. Her gaze was fixed upon me. There she stood, poised in anticipation. It's amusing how quietude doesn't invariably signify tranquility. At times it emits a soft hum. It resonates within you under your decisions, under your very breath. A subtle pulse that signals a change is occurring, even if the words remain unspoken. The days unfolded with a certain weight after that gaze. Adam failed to appear at my doorstep. I chose not to attend his gathering. Yet, an unseen force lingered between us, unwavering and ever-present. A hidden current flows beneath the icy surface of a frozen lake. At first glance, all appeared to be tranquil. Yet beneath the surface turmoil swirled. Greg returned to his abode. He pressed his lips to my cheek just as he always had. Placed his suitcase beside the stairs. Engaged in light conversation. Inquired about the neighbors. Does it seem satisfactory? Silence, I uttered. The utterance seemed to carry the weight of deception. As we sat down for dinner, I found myself nodding at all the appropriate moments. I inquired about his meetings. I chuckled at just the right moments with the perfect inflection. Yet, I found myself in a realm far removed from the present moment. And I was certain he sensed it too. Not in the manner of detecting a lie, but rather in that instinctive, primal way that individuals in enduring marriages come to understand one another. During the meal his hand brushed against mine. A fleeting moment that lingered in the air. Merely with a gentle touch. I recoiled. He remained silent. Yet his gaze held a moment longer than necessary. Later, I found myself standing before the bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand, examining my reflection as if I were scrutinizing a stranger. What was I transforming into? Had I committed any misstep? Negative. Not at this moment. Yet, the mere contemplation of it left me feeling more despondent than if I had actually gone through with it. That evening, as we lay in bed, Greg extended his hand towards me. I stood still, caught in a moment of sheer disbelief. It was not revulsion. It was not fear. It was a void. I was not present. Across the lawn, I found myself in a room bathed in candlelight, where the soft strains of piano music filled the air, accompanied by a man who had yet to press his lips to mine. Yet somehow, he had uncovered more of my essence than my husband had in all those years. I allowed Greg to make contact with me. I allowed it to unfold. I shut my eyes, summoning a state of numbness within myself. In the moments that followed, I averted my gaze from him, and I wept in silence. For it is often the most heart-wrenching betrayals that do not commence with a kiss. They commence in quietude. It arrived in its most unadorned state. A gentle rap upon the door. The sun began its descent, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Sunlight slanting through the blinds, a golden hue suspended in a moment of indecision. As I unsealed it, there he stood. Adam. He grasped a petite, circular plate. 2 homemade lemon shortbread cookies lay upon it, their shapes a touch irregular, with soft powdered sugar gently dissolving at the edges. "I suppose I owe you," he remarked, a faint smile playing on his lips. He was alluding to the apple bread I had delivered weeks prior, the very one I convinced myself was merely a gesture of goodwill, just as I'm certain these cookies were meant to be. A kind act between neighbors. Yet his eyes revealed an entirely different narrative. The plate quivered gently within his grasp. Not apparent. It was subtle, yet unmistakable. A realization that transcended mere physicality. "I appreciate it," I replied. I grasped the plate, mindful to avoid any contact with his fingers. Mindful of the urge that threatened to spill forth. He remained where he was, not yet ready to depart. "I was pondering," he started, then hesitated. His gaze faltered for a moment, as if weighing the peril of uttering the next words. "Would you like to stop by sometime this week? Emma is once more at her grandparents' home, and—" He came to a halt, and that word lingered in the air, a forbidden whisper striving to maintain its innocence. "I possess this vintage jazz vinyl that I've been intending to listen to. I thought you might appreciate it." I ought to have declined. I ought to have offered a polite smile and expressed my gratitude, yet I did not. I ought to have recalled the tears I shed next to my husband just nights before, guilt coiling tightly beneath my ribs. However, I responded, "Is it Thursday already?" He inclined his head in acknowledgement, and thus it came to an end. We remained untouched. There was no flirtation between us. There are no guarantees. There are no transgressions. Merely an accord forged in a silence that lingered far beyond the realm of the casual. That whole week carried an unmistakable sense of change. I found myself repeatedly drawn to my reflection in windows and mirrors, not out of vanity, but to discern the person I was evolving into. On Thursday, I adorned myself with a touch of perfume, a gentle caress behind each ear. Not that I desired anything to unfold. Yet, deep down I understood that if it were to happen, I would not intervene. At precisely 7:03 p.m. I rapped on his door. He opened it with a tenderness I hadn't realized I longed for. The record was already in motion, a soft, sultry saxophone seeping into the hallway. We occupied opposite ends of his couch, maintaining a dignified distance between us. The candles flickered once more, yet this time they felt less like mere objects of utility and more like a beckoning call. We engaged in conversation. We savored our tea. The melody enveloped the stillness, and time came to a standstill. At a certain moment I found myself chuckling at something he had remarked. He cast his gaze in my direction, truly observed, as he had done previously. I felt as if I were something exquisite yet fragile. I cast a glance behind me, yet I held my gaze steady. It is often said that events do not unfold in a singular, overwhelming moment. A kiss, a fall, a mistake. Each one takes root long before the instant they manifest. Yet, I can recall the precise moment I ceased my struggle. It lacked any sense of drama. No fireworks were present. There is no grand orchestral score rising in the background. The gentle conclusion of a vinyl record, accompanied by the delicate scratch of the needle lingering in stillness. Adam rose to grasp the needle, his hand hovering above it as if lost in a different thought altogether. As he settled back into his seat, the distance between them had diminished. Not mere inches, not assertive, simply nearer. Just enough for me to sense his warmth, the burden of his presence, the weight I had labored for weeks to dismiss. We lingered in silence, suspended in a moment that seemed to stretch endlessly, yet pass in the blink of an eye. And then, he directed his gaze in my direction. That was all it required. I refrained from leaning in. He did not either. We exchanged glances, two souls who had long anticipated this moment. Weary from the charade, finally ready to acknowledge the inevitable. First his hand moved. Gradually, with careful consideration. It felt as though he was offering me every opportunity to halt his advance. His fingers brushed against my wrist. Merely a stroke. Yet, it was sufficient to erase the awareness of my surroundings. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. As I gazed at our hands, his fingers softly traced the contours of my wrist, as if he were committing its form to memory. I remained steadfast, refusing to withdraw. He murmured something then. It was a sound so gentle that it nearly escaped my notice. "Are you certain?" And I replied in the affirmative, not due to any careful consideration on my part. Yet, in that instant, refusing seemed akin to rejecting a fragment of my being that had long been famished. He pressed his lips against mine, gently, with a sense of deep respect, and all that resided within me shattered. Silence reigned, with no sighs escaping and no fastenings giving way. It lacked any sense of urgency. It wasn't yearning in the manner that one might imagine when contemplating forbidden desires. Silence enveloped the surroundings, excruciatingly silent, as if two souls mourned the existence they once embraced, all the while yielding to the reality they could no longer evade. Every detail escapes my memory. The way he cradled my face, as if it were a treasure beyond measure. The way he quivered at the brush of my fingers against his chest. The manner in which we both shut our eyes suggested an inability to witness the actions unfolding before us. And when it concluded, silence enveloped us. We lay there, breathless, warm, undone. And I gazed at the ceiling, contemplating the person I had just become. I felt no sense of victory, or alluring, or invigorated. I experienced a profound stillness. It's akin to that instant when a glass shatters, and you find yourself gazing at the fragments, acutely aware that they can never be reassembled in the same way. He extended his hand toward mine. I permitted him to grasp it, not out of a desire for solace. Yet, in my desire to escape the solitude of my decision, I departed before the dawn broke. The house exuded a serene warmth, enveloping everything in a tranquil hush. His breath lingered, a gentle rhythm beside my own. The sheets twisted around our feet, as if they were attempting to recall the art of concealment. I lingered by the window for what felt like an eternity before finally making my escape. The lawn retained the lingering dampness of the rain that had graced it the night before. The sky, a delicate hue, lingered in a state of uncertainty, caught in the balance between the embrace of night and the promise of dawn. I wrapped my coat around me and traversed the narrow patch of grass leading to my front door. 10 steps that now seemed to belong to a realm far removed from my own. I refrained from glancing about. I ought to have. I failed to catch a glimpse of her. Yet she caught sight of me. Mrs. Cranford. Just a couple of doors away. Awake with the dawn. She cherishes her porch and her gossip as if they were essential to her very existence. She remained still, cradling her mug of black coffee as if it were a gavel, observing me as I slipped into my home like a shadow that had no right to be wandering at such an hour. I reassured myself that she would remain silent. Yet the silence resonated with an overwhelming intensity. By that afternoon I sensed it. The delicate shifts in the atmosphere, the lingering glances from neighbors, the peculiar silences that punctuated our exchanges. And then arrived the message. As I was folding laundry, Greg sent it over. Received an unusual email. Unnamed. Only this. A snapshot captured a brief message. Your spouse is entwined in an affair with the neighbor. Inquire about her whereabouts on Thursday night. There is no evidence. There is no image available. Merely words. Yet, there are moments when mere words possess the power to incinerate it all. My hands began to tremble. I held back my response for a moment. The screen held my gaze for what felt like an eternity, until the letters started to meld into one another. A hazy jumble of shapes and shadows. I contemplated the idea of rejecting it, on the subject of brushing it aside with laughter, concerning the notion that it was merely a discontented neighbor causing a ruckus. Yet I found myself unable to do so. The truth extended beyond my actions alone. Every time Greg cast his gaze in my direction, it was unmistakably present in my eyes. It resided within my quietude. My doubts linger. My unexpected attention to makeup, the fragrance I had long since abandoned. It was in the manner I ceased to inquire about his return time. He failed to make that call that night. I did not either. Instead, I lingered in the shadows of my living room, gazing out across the lawn toward Adam's house, pondering whether he had received a message as well. Were he to find himself enveloped in that same stillness? Whether he shared the same fear? I refrained from knocking. He did not either. We had traversed a boundary, and now the world was beginning to close in around us. And yet, in spite of the nausea, in spite of the guilt clawing at my throat, a fragment of my being murmured, "Would you reconsider your stance?" And that voice within me, the one I had, concealed beneath my well-meaning intentions, my rehearsed smiles, my endless solitary nights, softly replied, "Negative." On a Tuesday, Greg returned home. It's not Friday as it typically is. Not with a forewarning. Simply, Tuesday. One entire day ahead of what was anticipated. The sound of the garage door reached my ears before his figure came into view. In that sound, weighty, mechanical, irrevocable, I sensed that something had changed. He entered the room without kissing me. He made no inquiry regarding dinner. He refrained from mentioning the weather or feigning interest in scrolling through emails. He simply stated, "We need to talk." And I was aware. I did not refute it. I refrained from deception, from shedding tears, or from contorting reality into a more digestible form. I conveyed my thoughts to him. All things. Exclude the graphic elements. Not the particulars that would unravel us completely. Yet, the truth that held significance. Indeed. I accomplished it. It was not a mere accident. Greg refrained from raising his voice. He appeared utterly devoid of anger. He appeared absent. As if someone had silently gathered the essence of the man I once knew and substituted him with an unfamiliar figure. Did it hold any value? He inquired. For the first time in weeks, I found myself at a loss for words. For the word worth seemed inadequate to encompass the magnitude of my loss, or what I had discovered. On that particular night, he found himself in the guest room, surrendering to the embrace of sleep. I found myself unable to sleep, not even for a moment. The following morning, I found myself at the kitchen window, observing Adam as he raked the leaves. The familiar cadence of it stirred a deep longing within me. He kept his gaze fixed downward. Not a single glance was cast in the direction of my house. Subsequently, I stepped out into the open air. I chose not to knock. I refrained from bringing cookies or bread. Nor did I feign that we were anything other than what we had transformed into. I simply lingered by the fence, biding my time. Eventually, he made his way over. He remained expressionless. "I apologize," he murmured gently. "I never wished to be the cause of your downfall." "You weren't," I murmured softly. "What I lost ages ago." We remained untouched. This time it will be different. The stakes had never been higher. Excessively shattered. I inquired whether he intended to relocate. He gave a nonchalant shrug. "I'm not certain at this moment." In that moment he uttered words that would echo in my mind forever. At times, our tumbles are not born of recklessness. We stumble when we remain stagnant for an extended period. As dusk settled, I carefully filled a modest suitcase. I found myself adrift, uncertain of my destination, yet acutely aware that I had to escape to another place. A place untouched by guilt, devoid of silence, and free from the burdens of pretense. Greg allowed me to continue. He made no inquiry about my return. Perhaps he had already grasped the truth. As I distanced myself from the house, the street, the existence I had inhabited like a specter, I walked by Adam's house, and for one fleeting, poignant moment, he raised his gaze directly towards me. He offered no gesture of acknowledgement. He remained expressionless. He merely observed. For the first time in many years, I experienced a profound sense of recognition.